Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. In today's video I will be focusing on how to create a glass shader with some nice realistic fingerprint smudges and some dirt on top of that. I was inspired by the render of Dusan Kovic, which is featured. His render is featured on the AL Shaders homepage, and I had a quick chat with him and I was asking him if I can use his render as an inspiration for upcoming tutorials, and he was quite happy to support me. So in today's lesson I will be creating a glass render or a glass shader which will look like this. It has the same principles as a typical glass shader, but it's a bit more realistic because you got this dirt effects on here, and you've got some fingerprints. You can see them here on the top, and also we have some displacements for this, and you can see this here on the side, and then an overall composition with a nice floor. And this time, because I had the time, I rendered this image with depth of field, which is heavily expensive, and as you can see it is still pretty noisy. But if you are in a production, they don't care. They mostly render it either with really high A samples, or they render a Z-pass and they just blur it in comp. This is actually most of the time what we do because rendering depth of field is still too expensive. So I won't provide you with textures. You can grab them from the internet. I show you how, and we will be starting from scratch. And let's head over to Maya. And I will show you the basic scene for now. This is just my render camera at the bottom here, and then I've got the plane which represents the wood flooring at the bottom, then the glass, one area light and one HDR light. So if I would show the reference spheres and I render, we should actually see the environment if everything is set up correctly. Let's first delete my previous test renders, and I guess I need to update the AA samples because they are still on my final settings. We want to and progressive. Let's see if it updates. There we go. So as you can see, this is my environment. Nothing too fancy, it's just a room with one light source, and this is my CG um, wooden floor, and then this is the overall light direction. So I've got a softbox on the left, and the main light is from the HDR. So this is it, and this is the current render. I still have depth of field on, so let's just stop this for now. In the camera at the bottom you've got Arnold tab, and then you have depth of field, so this is disabled and we should see a crisp render now. This is the floor texture. I won't be going in detail how I created this because this should focus only on the glass. So I will be starting by creating a basic shader for glass, and then I will add, after each other, I will add the smudge maps and displacement maps, some bump to distort the refractions. So let's jump right into this. Alright, I already have assigned the AI standard shader to the glass. This time I won't be using AL shaders because in my opinion the AI standard is a superior glass render, so that's why I will be using this shader. But in the end it doesn't matter because the maps I will be using also apply to the AL shader, the AL surface shader, so it does not matter which shader you use. But I will be going for the standard shader this time. So the first important thing to do is, if you select your geo, you can click actually in the render to select your geo, and then in the shape node of this, under the Arnold tab, you have this opaque checkbox. So on default it is on, which means non-transparent shadows. If you uncheck this, it just means that you will get transparent shadows which glass actually has, because you don't get a fully black shadow with a glass. You always get some light passing through the glass. So make sure to disable this, and then heading back to the shader, the first thing you got to do is, for a basic shader, disable the diffuse contribution. So just disable this, and now you should get a black shader. There we go. And then for specularity, enable the weight to 1, the roughness to 0, and make sure to enable Fresnel, which is a reflectance at the normal. So on 1 it's like a chrome, and on 0 it's a dielectric. And then in the refraction tab, which is also transmission, make sure to increase the weight and set the IOR to something between 1.4, 1.5, or 1.55 or something. So I like to have a bit more shiny glass, so I'll go to 1.55 for an IOR. You can Google the scientific values if you want to make this more realistic. And then make sure to enable Fresnel use IOR, which just states that the index of refraction will be driving the reflectance at the normal. This is what it's doing. What else? Dispersion Abbey is the when light passes through a medium like a prism or something, the light ray itself is being broken up into the initial colors or wavelengths, and that's why you see rainbows or something when you see rain. So this is mimicking this effect. So the lower this number, the stronger the effect. So if you have a value of 40, for instance, you won't see the effect that heavily, but a value of 2 or 3 will really make your render look colorful. So let's just see if you can already see what's going on here. You can see the breaking of the ray, and you see all the rainbow colors. Like typical glass does not have this effect so strong, or it's most apparent in like diamonds or prisms or prismas where it's really broken up, the light rays. So for now, let's just disable this. And this is the typical glass shader we have so far. So the first thing we're missing is the logo, and to do that, I have already some textures, but all I did was go to Google and search for Guinness logo or something. Let's just see what we get. Yeah, exactly. And I was just searching for these guys, and let's just load them back into Maya, and then I can show you how you can get them actually on top of your glass. Because of for render speed, I like to have a lower or smaller resolution. You can see the resolution at the bottom. It's now 700 by 1000, which is still pretty big for the tutorial. So it's just make 25% of this. So it's pretty small, and we can see quick feedback. I also like to change the bucket size to a smaller value, so we get smaller buckets. So I just had a Maya crash, but we stopped at the bucket size, so I just changed the bucket size to 16, and this is where we are now. So this will be now my working resolution. And the first thing I want to do is disable the refraction because it takes the longest to render. So in the shader, I'll go to refraction and just disable the weight. So we just have a specular material. And I will also hide the floor for now, just to speed everything up and so we get fast feedback. So this is where we are. And the first thing is I want to create the image node so we can actually see the logo on top of that. So image 6, and I already created those masks, so I just copy the path and paste this in this image node, and this is now the logo. And if I would connect this to the color like so, let's see what we got. Somewhere is the logo. So the first thing I want to do is actually translate this. I move to isolate selected so I can see what the node looks like. And the first thing is I will go to the AI image node, or you can, if you use a file node, go into the 2D placement node and offset the UVs, the scale, make this smaller, something like so. and like so, and change it to file so it does not repeat, it's just the one file. I will offset this and move this up. And also, just for now, I will offset the texture so I can see the whole glass, and you can see it's still a bit too big. So let's just make it even smaller, like so. And oops, just offset this. The height is good. Just change the hue. Okay, you see that the glass currently is rotated, so I will need to offset this a bit to the side so we get it into the center. I'm not sure, but I think this is good enough, so let's just move this a bit up again. So this is now the first Guinness logo, which is the color logo. And the same offsets will be used for the masking of this. So for now, this is this, and important is that Arnold is a linear renderer. So you got to be sure that your textures are also in linear space. Or what you got to do is, I think you can try this. Ignore the color space. Let's just see if this actually works. It did not seem it's working. So what you can do is create an AL color space node and connect the color to the color space input and the out to the color, and then make sure that you change the source space to sRGB, and then you can directly see that the color now looks way better than this. This is now a wrong interpretation. So this looks better, and this is now my color on top of the glass. So if I enable diffuse weight, you can see the texture appearing here. So the next thing I want to do is I want to create a weight. So this weight here, so everything else is black, only the Guinness logo has a weight. So to do this, I have another mask, and I will create another image node and just copy the parameters, or actually the file node. And ideally, you would not create a new one, you just duplicate this one so you get the correct values already. And then I just copy the path, and I will just paste this in here. And the same thing goes into the weight. So let's just see what this looks like if I connect the R into the KD. K is the weight and D is for diffuse. So this is the weight map and this is the color map. So they are aligning. The only difference is that the top is gold and the rest here is completely white. So everything which is white will have a diffuse component. And let's just call this logo mask, and this will be logo, and save. Alright, so this is the first part, and now we have the logo appearing, and the next thing is I want to control the roughness of the logo. To do so, I will use this guy as my controller for the roughness. So first I will create an AL remap float, and the mask, you don't need to use a mask for this, but you can. So the R goes into the mask, and the input color will be my my global specular roughness value. So before I show you, no, before I change the mask, but I want to first connect this to the KS, which is the weight of the specular, but I want the roughness. So connecting this to the specular roughness, which is this guy. So if you can see now, if I change the amount of the input, the whole glass gets rough. And this is actually what I want. So the only thing first is I want to define a starting value for everything which is glass. So it is not perfectly reflective. It will have some roughness to it. Just change your perspective and go to the camera and just go closer, and just that we see some nice reflection and see the amount of roughness. So I'm just looking here at the glass, and you can see on 0 it's perfectly a perfect mirror, which is not really happening in real life. So there's always some breakup. So let's just try a value of 0.1, which is too strong in my opinion. Okay, something like 0.06 for the initial value. And then let's see the roughness on the logo. So now I have the mask connected, which means everything which is white will be now controlled when I do some remapping. So the remapping only influences which is coming in from the mask. So let's see, I want to have the logo to be rougher than the glass. So let's just change the input min and make it negative or whatever. You can also change the minimum value here, increase that. So this is now the roughness value for the logo. Let's see how this looks. You can see the difference here already. So before, it's pretty shiny on top, and if I increase the roughness, it gets rougher and you see less reflection. The same for the top logo. You can see that there is a bigger fall off on top of that. So, and also if I change to direct spec, you can actually see what is happening. So everything else is pretty clean, but the logo is rough. It looks almost sandblasted, which is exactly what we want. And you can also decrease the amount of reflection if you control, let's just do this. This is called Spec R. And let's create another AL remap float, and this is just spec. And the same maps connect here, so the out R goes to the mask, and the out value goes into the this time weight of specular. So the default value is 1. So everything is perfectly reflective, and I will just reduce the amount on the logo just a tiny bit. Maybe this is already too much. Let's go to this direct spec and original values like so. Let's just store this, and I had it on 0.54, and you can see the amount is being reduced. I think it's a bit too much, so let's just keep this at 0.8 or something and go back to beauty. So the first thing is done, the logo is in place. The next thing I want to do is create the displacement map and the logo at the back. So this is also an AI image, and I first need to find this now. Fingerprints, displacement. So this is the guy I will be using. Connecting it to here, and this one just for the placement, I will connect this just to the, what do we connect to the emission. What does emission? It's just connecting this quickly just to see something. So I will connect the out R to the emission, and let's see if I can see the map somewhere. There we go. So this is my logo for the backside of the glass. Let's just see which one is the backside now. Yeah, so this one. All right, so the first thing is I want to scale this downwards like so. I have the UV seam here, so it's a bit, it's not helpful, but we need to get it to work. So I will just move this up. Also doing this offset so I can see where we are, and just making this smaller and not so wide. Damn it, where are we? It's a bit of fiddly, but when you have it, you just need to do it once, so it's all good. Alright, so this is the logo. I will make this a bit smaller, and I will position this at the UV edge and move this up. So this is now a bit to the side. I I wanted it to be here actually, but then I need to fix the UVs, which I'm not doing now. So this is where we are, and this will be the displacement. So it works like so. Everything which is white will be extruded, and everything which is black will be the zero level. So in the displacement shader, you have the value of zero. It's called zero something. I don't know. I will show you just now. And if you've got a value ranging between 0 and 1, and you've got gray values, you would set this to 0.5. So everything which is black will be extruded inwards, and everything which is white will be extruded outwards. So for this, though, we will just use a value of 0 because we just want to extrude it outwards. So the first thing you got to do is go to the shading engine and connect your displacement texture, which is this guy, displace, and connect this to the displacement material. It should create a displacement shader automatically. So in here, you have the Arnold tab, and it's called scalar zero value. So 0.5 is just what I would describe, and a value of 0 is what we want. So on 0, it will be extruded outwards. So first disable auto bump, because we just have this logo, and change the mode to basic, and let's just update the scene and see what we got. Alright, so this is now the current extrusion of the logo. What do you think? So apparently, or obviously actually, the scale is way too high. So let's just reduce this by 0.1 maybe? No crash. Alright, so this is still too much. And let's just first see what my wireframe looks like. As you can see, it's pretty heavily subdivided. That's why it's taking a while. So in the glass shape under the Arnold tab again, you've got the Subdivision tab, and it should be on cat clock, and you should have some iterations. The higher this value, and be really careful, will subdivide your mesh. So let's just start with a value of 1, and you can see what we get. It's way faster to compute. And let's just as you can see, it's looking weird and blocky, and it doesn't really look like the logo. And the problem is the default connection is the alpha, which actually is not correct. So you want to outcolor R as a displacement, and then you can see, oh, it's working now. All right, it's still extruding too much. So going back to the shader, displacement shader, and changing the scale to something like 0.1, 0.01, and you can see a hint of extrusion. So for now, the subdivisions are too low, so let's increase them again. I'm going to 2. Let's see then what the detail. So this detail is now looking actually quite good. We've got some blurry edges, which is exactly what I want. Because if you check the reference, you can actually see that it is kind of soft, like so. It's not really perfectly hard-edged. Alright, so this is set up. If you think this is not enough extrusion, you just increase the displacement shader a bit. Let's just go to 0.02 and see what we got. Yeah, I think this should work. Alright, so we got this step done, and we have the logo done. So let's head over to shading mode, and now you can actually see the nice effect we have here in the back. Alright, so the next thing is adding those greasy fingers and smudges. So ideally you would paint them in Mari or Substance Painter or some other tool set, but for this tutorial and for ease of this setup for you guys, you can go to Google and just type in like fingerprint smudges or something, and in the images you get nice like stuff like this, which is perfectly for this kind of stuff. So this is maybe not good, it's hair or something. Some salt, I guess. So you've got several good results. And I already downloaded some. I think I actually have exactly this one for the fingerprints. And all you gotta do is just download them, and I show you how to make use of them. So the first thing is I will create AI images. Let's just call this smudge something. If I can select this, smudge. And let's see which one we gotta take. So smudge is 002. Copy and paste the path. And this one goes now to the emission, so I can see the map. All right. No, this one goes into here. Let's just try this again. There we go. All right, isolate selected to see the node. Not seeing anything, updating. Where is it? It might be that the UVs are not correct. Let's just double check. Displacement goes here, isolate selected. All right, I just restarted Maya and it works again. So if I select the smudges, you can see how they look like, and they are way too stretched. So let's just control them quickly using the UV parameters and just scale them down and change it to file again so you don't get the edges. And now let's just scale this a bit. Okay, it should go around like so. You can also use a mirror mode, so it is just reflecting it back until you see a nice matching edge, something like this maybe. And then let's just move it up, either scale it or just offset it upwards. Scale it down, scale a bit more. All right, it might seem that it's a bit stretched, so let's just make them a bit wider. Like so, and you can see it's nice, like something has been running down here or something, and you can see it's looking quite good. Let's go to camera so we have a better view of what we will be seeing in the end. And now you can rotate it until you're happy with the positioning. So I like this. You can see those lines at the side. And let's just offset this a bit downwards. Also, let's just add mirror for this, so we always have a continuous map. Okay, and okay, so this is now my first pass of the smudge map, and this is my spec intensity, and this is my roughness map. So what I want to do, I want to combine those roughness maps. So the first thing is creating a AL combine float and combining those two maps. So the R goes into input 2 and the out here goes there, and this goes into the roughness. So this is the first connection, and let's just see if I put this to add, I'm adding those together, and the values is now from here to here, so it gets brighter overall. So before we add them and see the result, I will create a remap float again, just to control the smudge map before we add this on top of the logo. So this one goes here, and now I can control this. I can make this something like so, to a bit more contrasty. Oh, it's really small values here. 2, that's too much already. 1.5, like so. Okay, and now this is being added on top, and let's see how the result looks like in a direct specular pass. Going back to perspective, and let's see what we got. So there's the logo here, and it's hard to see, you don't see them so good. So let's just change the remaps and make the white parts wider. So lowering the max value, and you can see it's almost perfectly white now, which is too strong. But I first do this, and then I change the overall output color, something like so. Let's just see this now. All right, now you can see those lines running down the glass. That's the first thing we want to do. And the next thing is the fingerprints. So let's just create another AI image. I need to be a bit faster because the time is running out. So AI image, and let's see which one we will be taking now. Smudges O2. Which one did we take? O2. Okay. So fingerprints. What is that? I think that's that. Okay, so let's just take the fingerprints, paste them in here, and then we also want to add them. So I'm doing this for now blindly. So combine, float, and a remap. I need to create shortcuts for those nodes. All right, so the output goes into the input here, goes into the input 2 here, and this output from here goes into here, and this goes there. So I hope this makes sense. If not, just check this video again and make sure you follow what I'm doing here. And let's go to isolate selected. And this is now this map, and this is the smudge fingerprint map. Currently it's way too big, so I need to scale this as well. You can see those fingerprints everywhere. Alright, so this is the fingerprint map, and I want to put this to file first. So it's being clamped. So this is the image going to the camera, so I can see the positioning better. Moving this upwards. Okay. So I like the placement. And what you gotta do now, you can either, or I would actually change the input min so you don't see this hard line from the texture. So if you increase this to something like this, you can actually see that it is working more or less alright. And when it's combined with the other smudge map, you actually don't see it where it actually is, which is perfect. So let's just make them a bit whiter. So this is now the positioning. So I actually want to move this a bit more down so we can see them better. And let's first increase the contrast on this a bit more. Let's go to 30 and the combine. So I want to move this down. So I select the image node, I copy the tab, so I have a floating window of this node. And then I click on the combine, and then I see the overall result, and I can still move the image, the thumbs, or the fingerprints. Alright, so they are currently positioned here. I just move them to the bottom. So this, you can see two fingers here at the bottom. Alright, so going back to shading mode and to the direct spec, you can see some fingers appearing here at the bottom, and this is exactly what we want. And how do I know where to plug them in? I always think of the real life situation. What is actually happening on the material if you grab a glass? So your greasy fingers or whatever oil on your fingers will leave a fingerprint, and it will change the surface. And mostly it's changing the roughness, because you can't change a glass material. So and you won't change really the strength of the reflection. You mostly just change the microstructure of the glass. So you will add some roughness to it, and this is what we're mimicking with these texture maps. So going back to the beauty and to the camera, you can see the fingerprints here. I maybe for this make this on 50% so you can actually see what I'm talking about. Alright, so now you can see the nice effects here at the top, and you can see the fingerprints at the bottom. So this is the current result we are at. And the next thing I want to do is I want to introduce some diffuse color for the glass, because most glasses are not perfectly white or perfectly see-through. They have some wear and tear, and they've got some, I don't know, they just are not perfectly see-through. So to do that, I will create a ramp texture, and the ramp texture will be in the end going into the diffuse color. But for now, I will connect this directly to the diffuse color, like so. And then I go to isolate mode again. And this is the ramp. So I want to have it white at the bottom and then moving up to be darker at the top with a soft interpolation. So this is what I want to create. And I also want to have a bit of a like breakup of this line here. So you have a noise inside of the ramp, and you can control this quite easily using the noise parameters. And the lower this value, the broader the noise, and the higher frequency it is. So I don't know, I want something like this. And at the bottom you can see what's happening, which is not what we want. So I'm going into the placement node and I'm just offsetting. I'm just offsetting everything in the V space. So just moving this down. Let's just go around and see if everything is still alright. Yeah, there's a bit of a seam going on. Obviously you want to do this properly, but the idea is the same, I guess. So this is the ramp, and I want to connect this to or merge this together with the logo. So the first thing I want to do is combining those two maps. So AL combine color and just adding them together. So this guy, out color goes to input 1, out color 2 goes input 2, and the combined out color goes to the color again. And I want to add them together. So this is now my current color. And now the problem is the weight is currently driven by a map as well, which looks like this. And I also want to add this to the map. So I will create an AL combine float. The first thing is the mask out R, which is this map here. And then I just want to connect the ramp to this as well. So this out color, damn it, out color R goes to this guy. And this goes to the KD value, so the diffuse weight. And I need to add them. So this is my diffuse weight now. And if I go to shaded mode, you should see a bit of a difference in the map. So if I change the color now to be white, you should see something happening. And this looks like a stained glass now. Obviously it's not refracting yet, but it is doing what I want it to be doing. So also I want to have a general mistiness to the glass. So I'm just adding some value to it. Might be a bit strong, but we will see. And the bottom one is definitely too strong. Okay, so you can also add some breakup, some noise to this as well, or some, I don't know, some smudges, whatever. It's all up to you how you want to break this up. Okay, so let's go to the shader and change this to be refractive. And I will render this so you can see where we're at. Alright, this is now the current render, and you can see the breakup. It might be a bit too strong, but you can see the effect. And if your glass is whatever, you know what you're doing, and you can just control the maps and blend them better or reduce the weight or whatever. You can see the displacement in the back as well, which looks pretty nice. So the next thing, and I think the last thing I want to do for this shader, is adding a breakup on the overall reflection and refraction. So to do this, I will add a bump map so we can control the amount, or actually the imperfections of glass, because currently this is a perfect glass, which again never would exist in real life. So AI noise, and I want to plug this into a bump node. But first, again, I will connect this into a emission, and I will start the IPR in isolated mode, and this is the current bump map. And it might already work. Let's just add some more divisions and some distortion. And it might be a bit big, tiny bit. So let's just make this something like this. And let's just connect this to the bump slot. And in my current Arnold version, it seems that adjusting the bump map on the fly is crashing the IPR session. So I just disabled this signal button and I don't get live updates. So I always have to retranslate the scene, but that's fine. So the bump map and drag this noise into here, which creates the bump shader and it connects it correctly. And as always, reduce the bump value to a low value because it's 99% of the time always too high, and update full scene. And before we start, I guess, never mind, it's starting already. Let's just see this portion. All right, comparing those two versions, you can already see what is happening. And I think it is too exaggerated. You can see the bending of the glass. And yeah, it is too strong. You can see even the logo is being bent quite heavily. And let's just increase, let's just increase the octaves to 3 and the amount to, or just change this amplitude to a quarter maybe. Let's just see what we get now. Like changing the amplitude just changes the overall color. It's shifting everything to black, so essentially drives also the bump strength. Alright, so now we can see this line here. And you can see some tiny breakup, some imperfections on the glass, which it should not be really apparent, but if it wouldn't be there, you would see it, I guess. It's just giving your renders a bit more detail, just a bit more of realism. You can see this reflection line, which is actually straight, and you can see that it is being bent now a bit, and even here there's a little offset, and it's just breaking it up a bit. Alright, this is the main thing I want to do on this shader. So I have my bump map, I've got the smudges, I've got the logo, and I've got displacement for the extrusion of the logo itself. So saving this, and now comes more or less the part where you make your render look more pretty. So I will unhide the second glass I had somewhere here, and I will also assign the same shader to this. And then I will unhide the floor or the ground plane, which is this wood texture. And I will also hide the reference spheres. And for in Photoshop, you have seen that there is like this nice background of a bar scene or something. So and all I did was go on Google, added a bar photo drink or something, some image like this. Actually, here's the one I used, this guy. And I just mapped this onto a plane like so. This is my plane, and I just added a simple texture uh, on this, and that's all I did. So if I render this now, let's see what we got. And the cool thing is if you add a plane to your scene, it will actually appear in refractions and in reflections, which gives you the nice finished look of your render. So you can actually see the nice I don't know, you can see whatever is in the background and how it's being bent, and you can see it on the table or whatever this should be. You can see the nice streaks on this, which just helps you sell the render. And for now, it's still a crisp render and it's perfectly sharp, and I don't have depth of field. So the thing what you got to do or want to do is if you want to have a fast render, and then you would render out a Z-pass. And in comp use a Z-pass to create a depth of field effect. Because I was feeling that I had lots of time. I actually rendered this overnight, this guy, overnight. 7 hours, yes, 7 hours. and with depth of field. So to control the depth of field, you go to your render camera, and at the bottom, I just changed the render mode to basic, so you can see quick feedback. So at the bottom, in the Arnold tab, you have a depth of field. So the focus distance is the distance which should be in focus, which makes sense. So I created a locator at this position here, and when I look through the camera and I go to display, heads up display, and object details, whatever you select, you can see the distance from the camera. So if I select this, you can see this distance 15.509 is the exact distance I'm using for my focus distance. And the aperture is then how much the image is being blurred in the distance and in the fore and background. This is based on the real physical size of the aperture. So it's not a photography setting where you can input f-stops of 4, 5, 6 and stuff. This is the real size aperture. So if I enable this, the depth of field, you can see what's happening. And this is now the edge of the floor. And if I increase the depth of field, you see a more heavier blur and still a focus in the front here. So this is the whole effect which is being created. So if you want to create nice bouquets, or however you pronounce that, you need to control the amount of blades and all this stuff. It's all in the documentation, so you can read this. And I just had a really narrow depth of field, and I rendered this. And my final render settings were, I think, 8, and then 2 in the glossy for the floor because it's really rough. And yes, that was all my render settings. I had a ray depth of 5 for the refractions, and I let it render the whole night. And in the morning, I had this render. So this is pretty much all you have to do to create a render like this. And if you want to have more control, you can output all the maps and you can control this effect even better in Nuke or your compositing software. Yeah, so I hope you did learn something from this tutorial and are now able to create nice looking glass renders and scene setups. It's not too special what I did. It's just actually quite straightforward. If you want to do it properly, you would do it in Mari and paint textures nicely and do a bit more effort to this. But essentially, this is how it's being done, and thank you guys for watching this and giving me all the nice feedback and support so I can be creating more tutorials for you guys. And thanks again for Dusan Kovic for giving me the inspiration to just create the same kind of similar render as his glass for the AL shaders, which honestly, oops, that was his car, which looks like this, which in my opinion looks still nicer because you have a stronger bokeh and depth of out of focus and depth of field. So once again, thank you guys, and always remember, keep it rendering and happy rendering. Thank you guys for watching. Cheers.